Have you ever watched someone else receive the life you begged for and still had to clap for them? Because I did. I learned how to smile with my mouth while my chest stayed tight. I learned how to say I'm fine in a voice that sounded normal. Because in my house, being difficult meant being punished with silence. My parents didn't hit me. They didn't scream. They did something quieter. They acted like I was optional. They funded my sister's dream the way people fund something they're proud to own: private mentors, summer programs, connections, a scholarship advisor, and whenever I asked for anything at all, it was always the same answer: not right now, be practical. Your sister has more potential. At first, I told myself it wasn't favoritism. I told myself I was being dramatic. But then I noticed the patterns. The way family photos always centered her. The way my name was missing from invitations. The way my father introduced her as my daughter and me as her sister. So I stopped asking. And I started building a life in places they didn't look. That's the part people don't understand. When you're ignored long enough, you don't just get sad, you get quiet. And quiet people see everything. The night everything changed wasn't a graduation. It wasn't a birthday. It wasn't even a fight. It was my parents' charity gala. A room full of expensive perfume and soft music. A stage wrapped in white flowers. A giant screen behind the microphone, waiting for the highlight of the night. My sister stood beside my parents in a dress that cost more than my rent. They looked proud, so proud, like the whole room belonged to them. And I wasn't supposed to be there, but I was. I stood near the service hallway where the light didn't reach, listening to strangers praise my parents for being generous, kind, supportive. Each compliment felt like salt on a wound that had never fully healed. My phone vibrated in my hand once, just once. A single message, 3 words that made my stomach drop. It's time. Watch. And then the host returned to the microphone and smiled like nothing in the world could go wrong. Tonight, he said, we honor the donor whose story moved the entire board. The screen behind him flickered. My mother leaned forward, excited. My father lifted his phone to record. My sister's smile widened, already ready to accept applause. And that's when I realized they thought this night would celebrate her. They had no idea the truth was about to be read out loud in front of everyone who mattered to them. And when my name appeared on that screen, I didn't feel anger, I didn't feel revenge. I felt something colder, relief. Because the hardest part wasn't being betrayed. The hardest part was realizing they would have kept erasing me forever if the world hadn't forced them to finally see me. Have you ever been standing in the same room as your own family and still felt like a stranger? Not because you hate them, not because you're angry, but because they learned how to live without looking in your direction, and you learned how to survive without asking why. I didn't become strong, the way people like to say it online. I became quiet. Quiet enough to hear the things they thought I wouldn't. Quiet enough to notice the patterns. Quiet enough to understand that in my family, love was never a feeling. It was a budget. It was a decision. It was a list of names, and mine was always near the bottom. My name is Mara Ellison. I'm 24, and I work the kind of job that doesn't look impressive on paper, but pays the bills on time. I'm a compliance assistant at a mid-sized nonprofit, mostly emails, spreadsheets, donor records, and making sure people don't accidentally break rules they swear they've never heard of. It's not glamorous, but it's honest. And for someone like me, honest became a form of safety. Because growing up, safety wasn't guaranteed, not in the dramatic sense. My parents didn't throw things. They didn't slam doors or leave bruises. If you met them at a dinner party, you would think they were the kindest people on earth. My father could make strangers feel seen in under 30 seconds. My mother had a smile that made people soften without realizing they were doing it. They were polished. They were admired. They were generous. Just not equally. I have a younger sister named Alina, 2 years younger, brighter in the way that seems to attract light. Teachers loved her. Neighbors remembered her name. My parents spoke about her like she was a little project they'd started early and expected to pay off. When she was 10, they enrolled her in private art classes because she had a gift. When I was 12 and asked for a school trip fee, my father said, "Well, see?" in a tone that meant no. When Elena got accepted into a competitive program in high school, they threw a dinner and invited family friends. When I got a scholarship offer, small, local, nothing life-changing, my mother kissed my forehead and said, "That's sweet, honey," like I'd shown her a drawing I made on a napkin. For years, I told myself I was imagining it. People say parents love their kids differently. They say families are complicated. They say I should be grateful I had a roof over my head, and I was. I am. Gratitude is real. But gratitude doesn't raise reality. Reality is sitting at the edge of your own family photo because they never asked you to move closer. Reality is watching them buy her new paints and canvases while you stretch one notebook across an entire semester. Reality is listening to your father say at the kitchen table, "Elena needs this," and never once hearing, "So do you." By the time Elena turned 18, the pattern wasn't subtle anymore. It was a policy. I remember the night my father announced it like he was reading quarterly profits. We were in the living room. My mother had one of those candles burning that smells like vanilla and money. Elena sat cross-legged on the couch, scrolling through college photos on her phone. I stood near the doorway, already tense, because whenever my father called, quick family talk. It was never quick, and it was never meant for me. He held a folder in his hand. Thick, organized, tabs, printouts. "We've made a decision," he said. Elena looked up, smiling, confident it was good news. It always was. My father continued, We're gonna fully sponsor Elena's education at Brightwell Academy of Design, my mother added. It's an investment in her future. Elena covered her mouth, eyes glossy. Oh my God, really? My father nodded, satisfied, like he just closed a deal. And then his gaze shifted to me and his expression didn't change, but something in my stomach sank anyway. Mara, he said, we're not in a position to do the same for you. It wasn't the words, it was the way he said it. Calm, final, almost bored. I swallowed. I'm not asking for the same, I'm asking for something. Anything. My father's face stayed neutral. You're capable. You'll figure it out? My mother looked at her hands like her fingers suddenly interested her. Elena didn't speak. She just sat there quiet, letting the air carry the decision away from her like it wasn't her responsibility to catch it. That was the moment I understood something that changed me. In my family, I wasn't the daughter they were building. I was the daughter they expected to adapt. The one who would understand. The one who would not make it a thing. That night, I went to my room, closed the door, and did something I'd never done before. I stopped hoping they would change. People don't realize how loud hope is when it finally turns off. It's like a constant buzzing you didn't notice until silence arrives. The silence was painful and clean. After that, I paid for everything myself. I worked 2 jobs through community college, late nights at a grocery store, mornings at a coffee shop where the smell of burnt espresso clung to my hair even after showers. I transferred to a state university because it was what I could afford. I took out loans I didn't want. I ate meals that were more salt than nutrition. I learned how to stretch $20 like it was a skill. Elena posted pictures. Elena traveled. Elena networked. My parents captioned her life like it belonged to them. So proud of our girl. So blessed to support her dream. My name disappeared from their mouths unless someone asked about me directly, and even then it was vague. Oh, Mara's doing her own thing. As if I was a hobby. I stopped going home for holidays. Not in a dramatic, door-slamming way. I just stopped. It wasn't that I wanted to punish them. I didn't have the energy for punishment. I was just tired of pretending I didn't feel the empty chair. The last time I visited, my mother hugged me tight and whispered, "You're always welcome here?" But then she didn't text for 3 months. My father didn't call for 8. I learned to build a life where I wasn't waiting to be invited, and for a while, that was enough. Until the envelope, it happened on a Tuesday. My workday was ordinary, keyboard clicks, printer noise, the low hum of fluorescent lights that makes time feel slow. I was sorting donor receipts when my supervisor passed my desk and said, "Mara, can you come to my office?" Her tone was careful. Too careful. I followed her down the hallway, past framed photos of smiling board members and plaques that always made me feel like I was walking through someone else's pride. When I stepped inside, she closed the door behind me. She didn't sit. "Mara," she said quietly, "I'm going to ask you something and I need you to answer honestly." My throat tightened. "Okay." "Are you related to Harold and Diane Ellison?" My father's name in her mouth sounded wrong, like hearing a private song played in public. I stared at her. "Yes, they're my parents." Her expression shifted. Something like discomfort, something like pity, something like she didn't want to be the person delivering bad news, but had been handed the job anyway. She took a breath. "They're hosting a charity gala this Friday." I blinked. "Okay." She opened her laptop and turned it toward me. On the screen was a digital invitation. Tici Eliso flu date iom Gala, celebrating the future of youth arts. It was sleek, expensive, elegant, the kind of design that screams donors and champagne. My father's face was on it, smiling, my mother beside him, Elena in the center radiant, wearing a dress that looked like it cost more than my monthly rent. It was a family portrait, a carefully curated one, and I wasn't in it. My supervisor spoke softly. "The Ellison Foundation is one of our partner donors. They've been funding several art scholarships, and they requested our organization's help with processing certain contributions this year." I swallowed. "Why are you showing me this?" She hesitated, then clicked to another tab, an internal email thread. The subject line read, "Anonymous major donar spkl rakyost." I didn't understand it at first. My eyes just moved over the words, and one sentence hit like a sudden drop in temperature. The donor requested the acknowledgement be read publicly at the gala, and the name must be announced exactly as written. My supervisor watched my face carefully. "Mara," she said, "the name is yours." For a second, the room felt too small, like the walls leaned in. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "What?" She turned the screen a little more toward me. The email had an attached PDFs, a formal acknowledgement script. Near the bottom, highlighted in yellow, were the words, "Please join us in thanking our anonymous benefactor, Mara Ellison." I stared at it so hard my eyes started to burn. "That's a mistake," I whispered automatically because my brain didn't know what else to do. "It isn't," my supervisor said. "We verified the legal name on the donation record. It matches your employee file." My hands went numb. I tried to speak, but the words didn't line up right. "I didn't donate. I can't. I don't have." "I know," she said quickly. "That's why I'm asking you. Do you know anything about this?" I shook my head slowly, heart pounding. My supervisor sat down finally, like her legs stopped holding her up. "The donation is enormous, Mara. It's structured through a donor-advised fund. It's clean, it's legal, it's documented. But whoever did it wanted your name attached." My mouth was dry. A donor-advised fund. Clean paperwork. Anonymous funding. My mind reached for the most obvious possibility, and it made me feel sick. My parents. "Elena," Maybe they used my name by accident or on purpose or because they thought it didn't matter, because in their world, my name was just another tool. My supervisor asked gently, "Do you want to attend the gala? If you're listed, it might be expected." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the absurdity sat heavy on my chest. Expected. I hadn't been expected anywhere in that family for years. I stood there staring at my name on a document meant for a stage. "My parents are going to read my name," I said slowly, like saying it out loud would make it more logical. My supervisor nodded, yes. In front of everyone, I felt my pulse in my throat. I imagined the room chandeliers, applause cameras, my father basking in admiration. I imagined Elena in her perfect dress, smiling for attention like she'd always done. And then I imagined my name being read out loud. Not as their daughter, not as someone they neglected, as a benefactor, a supporter, a proof of their beautiful family values, a story they could sell. I should have felt angry. I should have felt ready to explode. But what I felt was something quieter and colder. I felt curious, because if someone used my name, it meant something happened behind the scenes. Something they didn't expect me to see. And I had spent my whole life being invisible. Invisible people become good at noticing. I cleared my throat. My voice sounded calm, even though my hands were shaking. "Can you forward me the full file?" I asked. My supervisor hesitated. "Mara, if this is fraud, I'm not going to do anything illegal," I said. "I just need to understand what's happening." She studied my face for a moment, then nodded. "I'll send it, but please, be careful." I left her office in a daze, walking back to my desk like my legs weren't fully mine. The lights felt brighter. The office noise felt distant. When I sat down, I opened my email and waited. A minute later, it arrived. Attachment Gala script, Donner record summary. I stared at the subject line like it was a door I wasn't sure I should open. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from my mother. I hadn't heard from her in weeks. "Hi, honey. Hope you're doing okay. Busy week. Talk soon." That was all. No invitation. No mention of Friday. No mention of the gala. Just a soft, harmless message like she was checking on the weather. My fingers tightened around my phone. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the attachment. The donor record summary loaded slowly, line by line. And there, beneath the structured fund name and a string of reference numbers, was a note typed in plain black text. "Special request from donor, please ensure the family reads the acknowledgement. Do not inform them in advance." My breath caught. Do not inform them in advance. Someone wanted the announcement to surprise not just to the room, to my parents, to Elena, to the perfect family. On the invitation, I sat very still, listening to the quiet hum of the office like it was suddenly the only sound in the world. If they didn't know my name would be read, then who set this up? And why? My phone buzzed again, another message. This time from an unknown number, no greeting, no name. Just 3 words. "Friday, don't blink." I stared at the screen until my eyes watered. Somewhere, deep in my chest, something that had been asleep for years sat up and opened its eyes. Not hope, not anger, something sharper. I glanced again at the gala invitation on my supervisor's email. My father smiling, my mother glowing, Elena shining in the center. A family picture built on a story. And now, whether I wanted it or not, my name was about to be printed into that story. Out loud. On a stage. In front of everyone. I didn't know who was behind it yet. But I knew one thing. If my name was going to be used, then this time, I wasn't going to stay invisible. And as the office clock ticked toward the end of the day, I made a decision so quiet it didn't even feel like a decision. It felt like gravity. I was going to that gala. Not to confront anyone.
Not to beg.
Not to cry. Just to watch, because whatever was coming had been planned carefully. And I had a feeling the person who sent that message didn't want me to stop it. They wanted me to see it. Cliffhanger. That night. At home, I opened the donor file again, slower this time, and noticed a detail I hadn't seen before, a second signature line on the paperwork, a name that made my stomach drop. Because it wasn't my parents, and it wasn't my sister's either. That night, the rain started soft and steady, like someone tapping a finger on the window, patient, unhurried. I sat at my small kitchen table with my laptop open, a mug of tea cooling beside it. The apartment smelled faintly like detergent and paper, the safe kind of boring I'd worked hard to earn. Outside, car tires hissed over wet pavement. Inside, the only sound was the ticking wall clock I'd bought from a thrift store, because it was $5 and still worked. Tick, tick, tick. I should have been exhausted. My workday had been long, and the news sitting in my inbox was the kind that makes your body believe it's in danger even when nothing is happening. But my mind wouldn't go quiet. I opened the donor record again, slower this time, like I was handling something sharp. The file wasn't emotional. It was plain, structured, numbers and dates and legal language. The kind of document that doesn't care who you are or what you've survived. It just tells the truth in its own cold way. I scrolled past the fund name, past the contribution total that still didn't make sense to me, and there it was again. Special request from Donner. Please ensure the family reads the acknowledgement. Do not inform them in advance. My throat tightened. Don't inform them in advance. I whispered to myself, testing the sentence the way you test a bruise. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't vague. It was deliberate. And then I saw what I'd missed earlier, the detail that turned my stomach over the first time, a second signature line on a related authorization form. 2 names where there should have been 1. The first line was the name of the donor, advised fund administrator, Some corporate signature, neat and impersonal. The second line, though. The second line was handwritten, and the name printed beneath it was not my father's, not my mother's, not Alina's. It was Jonah Klein. I stared at it so long my eyes went dry. Jonah Klein wasn't a stranger. He wasn't family either, not technically. He was my father's oldest friend. He was also their attorney, the man who had sat at our dining table during adult conversations, leaning back in his chair, ling-daifing with my father like they'd built something together. The man who gave Alina graduation gifts in crisp envelopes. The man who, when I was 17, once told me casually, "You're the practical one, Mara. That's a gift." I hadn't heard his name in years. My fingers hovered over the touchpad. If Jonah's involved, I murmured, then this isn't sloppy. It was planned. It was legal. It was designed. I closed the laptop halfway, then opened it again like my mind couldn't decide whether the truth was safer seen or hidden. Rain tapped the window harder, a sharper rhythm. Somewhere down the hall, a neighbor's door shut. I heard a muffled laugh, a television, a normal life. It made me feel oddly alone, like everyone else was living in a world where your name wasn't about to be read out loud in a room full of people who never bothered to say it with pride. I picked up my phone and stared at my mother's message again. "Hi, honey. Hope you're doing okay. Busy week. Talk soon." It was the kind of text people send when they want credit for caring without actually doing anything. My thumb hovered over the reply field. I could ask her directly, "Are you having a gala? Why didn't you invite me?" But I already knew the answer. She didn't invite me because inviting me would be acknowledging me. And acknowledging me would ruin the version of the family they liked showing people. So instead of texting her, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I opened my contacts and searched Jonah. His number was still there, saved from years ago. My thumb hovered again. Then I put the phone down. Not because I was scared. Because I wanted to be smart. People like Jonah didn't slip on accident. They slipped when they thought they were untouchable. They slipped when they were sure you didn't know how the game worked. My father always thought I didn't understand the game. That was the advantage. I stood up and walked to the sink, rinsed my mug even though it wasn't necessary. The small act gave my hands something to do. My reflection in the dark kitchen window looked tired, pale, eyes too sharp for someone who was supposed to be calm. "I'm not going to panic," I told myself quietly. My voice sounded steady. It didn't feel steady inside. I returned to the table and opened the file again, focusing on the facts like facts were a railing I could hold. Contribution date 2 months ago. Request date 3 weeks ago. Acknowledgement script finalized yesterday. Then, buried in the summary notes, I found a line I hadn't understood before. Purpose designation Elena Ellison, Brightwell Academy capstone sponsorship, for scholarship, naming rights. My stomach tightened. Naming rights. So the gala wasn't just a party, it was a public crowning. A stage where my parents would announce a scholarship named after Alina, or a program, her honor. Something that made them look like generous parents raising a generous daughter. And somehow, my name had been attached to a major gift behind it. As the anonymous benefactor, as if I'd supported the dream they funded while they left me to build my own life on ramen and overtime. My jaw clenched and I forced myself to relax it. Anger is loud. Anger makes you sloppy. I didn't need light, I needed clarity. I clicked open the attached gala script. It started with flattering words. Phrases like, community pillar, family legacy, a commitment to youth, the kind of language that washes people clean in public. Then came the segment labelets. Especial e canabla di gementi anonymous benefactor. I read it once, then and again, because the wording wasn't neutral. It was pointed. It spoke about quiet sacrifice, about elder sibling who gave without being seen, about someone who understood what it meant to build success without applause. My throat tightened. They weren't just going to read my name. They were going to describe me, in front of my parents, in front of Alina, in front of a room full of people who knew the Ellisons and believed their story. That's when it hit me. This wasn't designed to honor my parents. It was designed to expose them. Softly, legally, publicly, and Jonah Klein, my father's attorney, had signed the paperwork that made it possible. "Why would you do that?" I whispered. The question wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even angry. It was confused. Jonah protected my father's image for a living. He handled the family's legal messes. He kept their hands clean. Unless Jonah wasn't acting for them. Unless Jonah was acting against and my buzzed again. Unknown number, a new message. If you call anyone, you'll ruin it. I froze. My fingers went cold, like my body recognized a threat before my mind did. I stared at the message, then at the rain-smeared window. Someone was watching the situation closely enough to know what I might do next, and they didn't want me to interfere. My breathing slowed on purpose. In, out, I typed one word. "Who are you?" I stared at it for a full 5 seconds. Then I deleted it, because if this was a trap, the first mistake would be thinking I deserved answers. Whoever this was, they wanted control. The best way to take control back was not to chase them. It was to observe. I locked my phone and set it face down like I was putting a lid on boiling water. Then I opened a fresh document on my laptop and typed a list. What I know. My name is attached to a major donation I did not authorize. The donation is legally clean through a donor-advised fund. The gala script will read my name publicly. The family is not to be informed in advance. Jonah Klein signed something related. What I need. Who initiated this? Whether my identity is being used with or without my consent. Whether this creates liability for me. What the surprise. is meant to accomplish. I stared at the last line and felt a chill, because there was another possibility I hadn't wanted to think about. What if this wasn't someone trying to help me? What if this was someone trying to frame me? What if my father's attorney had engineered a story where Mara Ellison was the donor so the family looked even better, like both daughters were so successful they were funding scholarships together? But then why the instruction to not inform them in advance? Why the pointed wording about an older sibling who gave without being seen? No. This wasn't a family PR move. This was a blade wrapped in velvet, and it was aimed at them. I leaned back and closed my eyes. Images came uninvited, the living room, the candle smell, my father's calm voice, "You'll figure it out." Elena's silence. My mother's hands folded like prayer without action. Then another memory surfaced, one I hadn't thought about in years. I was 19, home for a weekend. Elena was packing for a summer program. My mother stood by the counter, talking to her about travel and safety and money. I remember standing near the hallway, listening. Elena asked, "Do we have to pay the deposit now?" My father answered from the table without looking up from his laptop. "We already did. Jonah handled it." Jonah handled it. He handled everything. I opened my eyes and reached for my phone again, not to call Jonah, not yet, to check the message details, but it was just a number, no name, no clue. My hands trembled slightly, and I hated that they did. It felt like weakness. So I stood up, walked to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and stared at myself in the mirror. My eyes looked steadier now. "This isn't about them," I whispered. It was a reminder. My life wasn't a reaction anymore. I wasn't a child waiting for them to notice me. If someone was using my name, I had the right to protect myself. If someone was trying to expose my parents, I had the right to choose whether I wanted that exposure to include me. I went back to the table and opened the donor summary again, looking for anything that connected to me. There was an address field. Not mine. A business address, Clyde and Mercer Law Offices. My pulse thudded, once, hard, so Jonah's office had been used as the contact point. That made sense. Donor-advised funds often need a professional intermediary for anonymity. Attorneys do that, quietly, legally. But why attach my name? Why not attach his own, or leave it truly anonymous? Unless the point wasn't the donation. Unless the point was what my name would do to the room when it was read. The way it would flip the story. A bright, clean narrative about generous parents supporting their talented daughter, suddenly interrupted by the name of the daughter they barely spoke about. The daughter who wasn't even in the invitation photo. The daughter who everyone assumed was doing her own thing. My stomach turned, and I pressed my palm against it like that could settle it. I thought about Friday night, the gala, the stage, the applause. My father lifting his phone to record Elena. My mother smiling for donors. Elena soaking in admiration. And then my name. A name that didn't fit their script. I could see it like a scene through glass, my father's smile freezing. My mother's eyes flicking around, confused. Elena's face tightening as the room recalculated who I was. But the thing that made my skin prickle was this. If Jonah set this up, he knew exactly what he was doing. And if he set it up, he also knew what would happen after. Because public exposure doesn't end at applause. It spreads. Donors talk. Board members whisper. Someone records. Someone posts. Someone asks questions in spaces where reputations live or die. I sat in the quiet and realized something I didn't like. This was bigger than family drama. This was a controlled detonation. And I was standing close enough to get hit by the breeze if I didn't move carefully. I needed information, not theories, not feelings. Information. So I did the only thing I could do without ruining whatever plan was in motion. I searched public records, not hacking, not spying, just the boring, legal stuff anyone can look up if they know where to click. I typed Ellison Foundation Annual Report, then Ellison Foundation Board Members, then Brightwell Academy Scholarship Naming Rights. Links appeared, PDFs, newsletters, press releases. I clicked through them slowly, scanning for familiar names. Board of Directors Harold Ellison, Diane Ellison, Jonah Klein, Elena Ellison, listed as Youth Arts Ambassador. My fingers tightened. Jonah wasn't just their attorney, he sat on the board. He had influence, he had access. Which meant he had the power to place my name into a public script and make it unavoidable. I scrolled down further and found a press release from last year. The Ellison Foundation announces expanded scholarship program following internal financial review. Internal financial review. My eyes narrowed. I opened it and read the bland language about proved transparency, and renewed commitments, and strengthening donor trust. It sounded normal, but it also sounded like something you write when you're trying to reassure people after something almost went wrong. I sat back and felt the air in my apartment turn thin. My father's image mattered to him more than anything. If there had been an internal review, it meant there had been scrutiny. If there had been scrutiny, it meant there had been risk. And if Jonah, board member, attorney, friend, was suddenly orchestrating a surprise announcement that could humiliate my parents, then maybe this wasn't about justice for me at all. Maybe my name was being used as part of someone else's cleanup. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. This time, a longer message. You were never on their list, but you're on ours. Show up Friday. Stay quiet. Let them tell the for once. My skin prickled. I stared at the words until they blurred. You're on ours. Who is ours? A group, a board, a donor committee. Someone inside their circle. I should have felt validated. Instead, I felt cautious. Because being chosen by strangers is not the same as being protected. The rain had slowed. The window was a dark mirror again. I could see my own face faintly reflected, eyes alert, mouth set. I opened my notes and added a new section. What I'm gonna do. Attend the gala quietly. Do not contact family. Do not contact Jonah yet. Bring someone I trust. Gather proof that my name was used without consent. I paused at that last line, proof. Because if this ended badly, my father would do he always did. He would rewrite the story. He would claim I was confused, emotional, ungrateful. He would say I was making things up. He would turn the room against me with polite words and a calm tone, and people would believe him because he looked like someone worth believing. Unless I had receipts, unless I had documents, unless I had facts. I clicked print on the donor summary and the script, then stopped my finger before it hit confirm. Printing at home was safe, but paper could be found. Paper could be stolen. Paper could be used. So instead, I saved the files to an encrypted folder and emailed them to myself from a personal account to a second account, creating a trail with timestamps. It was small. It was cautious. It was what survival had taught me. Then I stared at my contact list again. A name I hadn't spoken in months hovered on the screens. Tessa Nagayan, my best friend. The only person who had seen me cry without trying to fix me. The only person who knew enough of my family's story to understand why a gala invitation without my name would still hurt like a bruise. I hovered over her name. The unknown number's message echoed in my head. If you call anyone, you'll ruin it. I didn't know if that meant call them or call anyone, but I wasn't going into a room full of Ellisons alone. I chose my safety. I typed a short text to Tessa, careful and plain. Are you free Friday night? I need you to come with me somewhere important. I'll explain in person. I hit send before I could overthink it. A moment later, the 3 dots appeared. Then her reply came. Yes. Are you okay? I stared at the question. Was I okay? I didn't know, so I wrote the closest true thing. I will be, just don't let me go alone. The rain stopped entirely after midnight. The city outside went quiet. Even the clock felt louder. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my body tired but my mind sharp. I kept imagining the moment my name would be read, not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted to know what it would feel like finally being visible in a room where my parents had always made me small. And somewhere in that imagining, a new thought slid into place. Jonah Klein's signature was on the second line. If Jonah had done this, then Jonah had a reason. And reasons leave trails. People like Jonah didn't take risks unless they were forced, unless someone had leverage, unless someone had proof, unless something was about to break. Friday wasn't just a gala. Friday was a pressure point, and I was about to stand in the middle of it, quiet and watchful. While a room full of powerful people learned something they didn't want to learn, my phone lit up one last time on my nightstand. Unknown number. A final message before sleep could take me. Wear something simple. Don't sit near them. And when your name is read, look at your father's hands. I stared at it, heart thudding. Look at his hands. Why? What was I supposed to see? I set the phone down slowly, like it might burn me. Then I closed my eyes, and the last thing I felt before drifting into a shallow, uneasy sleep was not fear. It was the cold certainty that I was walking toward something that had been planned for a long time, and I still didn't know whether I was the target or the trigger. Cliffhanger, the next morning, I opened my email and found a calendar invite I didn't recognize, sent from Jonah Klein's office, scheduled for Thursday at 6:15 p.m., with a single line in the notes. Before the gala, Mara must understand what she is to them. The calendar invitation sat in my inbox like something alive. I stared at it for a long time before opening it again, just to make sure I hadn't imagined the wording. Thursday, 6:15 p.m., location Klein and Mercer Law Offices, notes before the gala, Mara must understand what she is to them. Not who, what. The word settled heavily in my chest. Outside my apartment window, morning traffic moved normally. People carrying coffee cups, buses sighing to stops, the ordinary rhythm of a day that didn't know anything about surprise announcements or anonymous donors. It felt strange that the world continued so calmly while my life tilted sideways. I checked the sender address again. Official domain. Real assistant signature. Not a fake. Jonah Klein wanted to meet me, or someone in his office did. I leaned back in my chair, fingers pressed together, trying to slow my thoughts. Part of me wanted to ignore it completely. Every instinct I'd learned growing up told me that stepping into my father's legal world meant stepping into territory where words were weapons and truth could be rearranged politely. But another part of me, the quieter, newer part, understood something important. If Jonah reached out first, it meant the plan had entered a stage where I mattered, and that meant information. I opened a reply window and typed carefully. I received the invitation. I'll be there. I hesitated only a second before pressing send. Almost immediately, a confirmation arrived. No greeting, no explanation, just, thank you. Please come alone. I stared at the words, feeling the same chill as when the unknown number warned me not to interfere. Come alone. That wasn't happening. Later that afternoon, work passed slowly. I reread donor compliance policies without absorbing a word. Every sound felt sharper, the click of keyboards, distant laughter, the hum of the printer. My mind kept replaying the message from the night before. Look at your father's hands. It made no sense, unless something physical mattered. Something visible only if you were paying attention. I wrote the phrase down in my notebook anyway. By lunch, I couldn't sit still anymore. I stepped outside and called Tessa. She answered immediately. Okay, you sound weird in your texts. What's going on? I watched cars pass while deciding how much to say. Do you remember how I told you my parents were hosting some big charity gala? The one you weren't invited to. Yeah, I already hate it. I exhaled slowly. My name is going to be announced there as a major donor. Silence. Then, Mara, what? I didn't donate. I didn't agree to anything. But legally it's real. Someone arranged it. Another pause. Longer this time, Tessa's voice softened. Are you safe? The question surprised me. Not are you okay? Not what does it mean? Say I think so, I said carefully. But their lawyer asked to meet me tomorrow. Absolutely not alone, she said instantly. I smiled faintly despite everything. I already decided that. Good. Because this sounds like rich people drama mixed with legal traps. That's exactly what it feels like. Tessa exhaled. Okay, I'll be nearby. Coffee shop, lobby, wherever. You text me if anything feels off. Relief loosened something tight in my chest. Thank you, I said quietly. Always. Thursday evening. Klein and Mercer law offices occupied the top floors of a glass building downtown, the kind with polished stone floors and a receptionist's desk that looked more like a hotel than a workplace. I arrived 10 minutes early. My reflection followed me across the marble lobby, simple black slacks, neutral blouse, low heels. Nothing dramatic, invisible enough to move unnoticed, but professional enough to belong. Exactly how I'd learned to survive. Tessa texted from across the street. I'm in the cafe. Window seat. You're not alone. I typed back a quick heart before approaching reception. The receptionist smiled politely. Ms. Ellison. Mr. Klein is expecting you. Of course he was. She handed me a visitor badge and directed me to a private elevator. As the doors closed, my pulse sped up despite my efforts to stay calm. I hadn't seen Jonah in nearly 5 years. The last time was at Elena's high school graduation party. He'd shaken my hand like I was already an adult, already distant, already separate from the family orbit. You'll land on your feet, he'd told me. At the time, it felt like encouragement. Now it sounded like prediction. The elevator opened into a quiet hallway lined with glass offices. Soft lighting, expensive silence. A woman greeted me and led me into a conference room overlooking the city. Jonah Klein stood by the window. He turned when I entered. He looked older than I remembered, more gray at the temples, posture slightly heavier, but his eyes were sharp, observant. Mara, he said gently. I stayed near the chair instead of moving closer. Mr. Klein. He gave a small smile. Jonah's fine. I didn't return the smile. He gestured toward the chair. Please sit. I did, placing my bag neatly beside me. My hands rested calmly in my lap, even though my heartbeat was loud enough to feel in my throat. Jonah sat across from me, folding his hands together. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, you must have questions. That's an understatement. He nodded, accepting that easily. Good. Questions mean you're thinking clearly. I leaned forward slightly. Why is my name attached to a donation I didn't make? He studied me for a long moment before answering. Because, he said carefully, was the only name that couldn't be dismissed. My stomach tightened. Dismissed by who? He exhaled slowly. Your parents. The word hung between us. I felt heat rise behind my ribs. You're going to need to explain that. I will, he said calmly. But first, I need you to understand something important. You are not being framed. You are not legally liable. The funds are legitimate, and your name was added with protective authorization. Protective for who? For you, he said. I almost laughed. You've known my parents for 30 years. Forgive me if I don't immediately believe this is about protecting me. A flicker of regret crossed his face. That's fair. He stood, walked to the table, and placed a folder in front of me. Inside were financial summaries, board minutes, audit notes. I scanned quickly, recognition dawning. These are Ellison Foundation records. Yes. My pulse quickened. Why are you showing me this? Because tomorrow night, Jonah said quietly, your parents' public image changes. And you deserve to know why before it happens. The room felt colder. I looked back at the papers. Highlighted sex reference discrepancies, fund allocations moved between programs, sponsorship credits reassigned, donations attributed differently than originally recorded. Nothing criminal, but misleading. Carefully misleading. They inflated certain contributions. I murmured slowly, understanding forming piece by piece. Jonah nodded once. For years, the foundation quietly redirected recognition toward donors who improved their image, including themselves. My throat tightened. They made it look like they personally funded things they didn't. Yes. I sat back stunned. They never technically broke the law, he continued, but ethically it crossed lines. The board initiated an internal review last year. The press release. Internal financial review. Suddenly it made sense. And my name, I asked. Jonah met my eyes. The board needed a correction that couldn't be spun. A truth visible enough that it reset the narrative without destroying the foundation entirely. I stared at him. You used me. His expression softened. We chose the one person whose absence proved the story wasn't honest. The words landed harder than anger. For a moment, I couldn't speak. All my life I'd been invisible. Now invisibility itself had become evidence. You're saying, I said slowly, that my parents' reputation was built partly on pretending they supported both daughters equally. Yes. And announcing me as a benefactor exposes that they didn't. Yes. I swallowed. So I'm a correction. Jonah didn't answer immediately. Finally, he said quietly, you're the truth they couldn't control. Silence filled the room. I stared down at the documents, memories flickering, missed opportunities, quiet dismissals, years of being treated like an afterthought. My chest felt tight, but not from sadness. From clarity. Why warn me? I asked. Because tomorrow will be overwhelming, he said. And because you deserve agency in something that involves your name. I looked up sharply. Do my parents know? Not Elena. No. The realization settled slowly. They're going to hear it with everyone else. Yes. I thought about my father's careful smile, my mother's perfect composure, Elena glowing under attention. The moment my name would interrupt that, I exhaled slowly. I didn't ask for revenge. Jonah shook his head gently. This isn't revenge. It's accountability. I stood, needing movement. Outside the window, the city lights blinked on one by one. What happens after? I asked quietly. That depends on how they respond, he said. Some people accept truth. I turned back to him. And me, he hesitated. That depends on what you want. The question felt heavier than everything else. What did I want? An apology. Recognition? Distance? Peace? I didn't know yet, but I knew one thing. For once, I said slowly, I want to decide what happens next. Jonna nodded. Then tomorrow, observe. Say nothing unless you choose to. The moment will speak for itself. I gathered the folder, then paused at the door. One more thing, I said. Someone's been texting me. Anonymous. His expression changed, alert now. What did they say? Warnings. Instructions. Jonah's jaw tightened slightly. That wasn't from my office. A chill ran down my spine. So someone else was involved. Someone watching. I nodded once and left without another word. Outside, night air hit my face like a reset. Across the street, Tessa waved from the cafe window. I walked toward her slowly, mind racing. The gala wasn't just a celebration. It was a controlled exposure. And I was the center of it whether I wanted to be or not. As I reached the cafe door, my phone vibrated again. Unknown number. One new message. Good, now you know part of it. Tomorrow you learn the rest. I stopped walking. Because beneath the text was a photo attachment. I opened it. It was taken inside the gala venue during setup. The stage, the massive screen. And highlighted in red marker on the rehearsal script taped to the podium. My name. Beneath it, someone had written 3 words. Watch his hands. And suddenly I understood something terrifying. The gala wasn't just going to expose the past. Something was going to happen live in front of everyone. Cliff-angered, as I looked closer at the photo, I noticed a detail no one else would recognize. The cufflinks laid beside the script on the podium belonged to my father, meaning he had already rehearsed the speech without knowing what it truly contained. The night before the gala, sleep didn't come easily. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while headlights slid across the walls in slow, passing waves. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the same image again, the rehearsal photo, the red mark script, my name printed in bold letters beneath stage lights that hadn't even turned on yet, and beside it, my father's cufflinks, silver oval shaped, engraved with his initials H.E. He wore them only at important events, board meetings, fundraisers, moments where reputation mattered more than comfort, which meant he had already practiced the speech. He had stood at that podium, rehearsing words meant to celebrate generosity, never realizing those same words would unravel the story he'd spent years building. I turned onto my side, pulling the blanket tighter. Watch his hands. The message replayed in my head like a riddle. Why his hands? What could hands reveal that faces couldn't? My father controlled his expressions perfectly. He always had. Calm voice. Measured smiles. Even disappointment looked polite when it came from him. But hands. Hands reacted before the mind caught up. They trembled. Tightened, dropped things. Maybe whoever was texting me knew something about him that most people didn't. Or maybe they wanted me to witness the exact second control slipped away. Morning. Friday arrived too quickly. I woke before my alarm, sunlight thin and gray through the curtains. For a moment, I forgot what day it was. Then my phone buzzed. Calendar notification, Ellison Foundation Charity Gala, 7:30 p.m. My stomach flipped. Today. I sat up slowly, grounding myself with routine. Shower, coffee, toast I barely tasted. Normal actions felt important, like proof that my life still belonged to me outside whatever spectacle waited tonight. At work, everyone seemed louder than usual. Or maybe my nerves sharpened everything. Emails piled up, meetings passed without meaning. At noon, my supervisor stopped by my desk. You okay? She asked quietly. I nodded automatically. Just tired. She studied me for a moment, clearly unconvinced, but didn't push. You can leave early today if you need. Relief washed over me. Thank you. By 3 o'clock, I packed my bag and walked out into crisp evening air. The sky looked impossibly calm for a day that felt like it was building toward impact. Preparing. Back home. I stood in front of my closet longer than necessary. The anonymous message echoed again. Wear something simple. I chose a dark navy dress, clean lines, no sparkle, nothing that demanded attention. Something that allowed me to exist without announcing myself. Invisible. Familiar territory. But tonight invisibility would be temporary. I brushed my hair slowly, hands steadier than I expected. Instead of anxiety, a strange calm settled over me. Not excitement, not fear, clarity. I wasn't going to the gala to confront anyone. I was going to observe, to see the truth unfold without interference. My phone buzzed. Tessa. I'm outside in 10. You ready? I typed back, because I'll ever be, before leaving. I opened my laptop one last time and checked the documents Jonah had shown me. The audit notes, the donor structure, proof that tonight wasn't random. Then I closed the screen firmly. Whatever happened next wouldn't be decided by paperwork, that would happen in real time. Arrival. The gala venue occupied a renovated museum downtown, glass walls glowing with warm light, valid attendants moving quickly, guests stepping out of black cars in gowns and tailored suits. Music drifted faintly through the entrance doors. Tessa squeezed my arm as we approached. Okay, she whispered, scanning the crowd. Rich people can frown. I laughed softly despite myself. Inside, everything shimmered. Crystal chandeliers, white floral arrangements. Waiters carrying trays of champagne that caught the light like liquid gold. And everywhere smiles. Polished, practiced smiles. I felt it immediately, the Ellison atmosphere. Carefully curated warmth. Generosity displayed like artwork. A large banner near the entrance ready. Teach Eliso Fodai Tion Invis Timive Tamarbaskras. Investing. The word made my chest tighten. We checked in under Tessa's name. Jonah had arranged guest credentials earlier that afternoon. No one looked twice at me. Just another attendee. Exactly as planned. I scanned the room slowly, and then I saw them. My parents stood near the center, surrounded by donors. My father's posture straight, confident. My mother radiant in a cream-colored gown, laughing softly at something someone said. Elena stood beside them, glowing beneath attention, her dress dramatic and elegant. Cameras flashed occasionally as guests greeted her. She looked happy, untouched by any of this. For a moment, an old ache stirred in my chest. Not jealousy, grief. Grief for the version of sisterhood we never had. Tessa followed my gaze. That them? I nodded. She squeezed my hand once. We stay back here. Observation mode? I exhaled slowly and nodded. The speech before the speech. An hour passed in quiet tension. Guests mingled. Music played softly. Conversations blurred together. I noticed small details instead of big ones. The way staff adjusted table cards. The way a technician checked cables near the stage. The way the massive screen behind the podium remained dark, waiting. At one point, my father walked past only a few feet away. He didn't see me. Of course he didn't. I watched him greet donors with practiced warmth, shaking hands firmly, maintaining eye contact exactly the way successful people are taught to do. And then I noticed something. His hands. He flexed his fingers repeatedly when no one watched, a subtle motion almost unconscious. Nervous energy I'd seen before when business deals mattered. A chill ran through me. He already felt pressure tonight. He just didn't know why. Alina. Near the bar, Elena stepped away from the crowd briefly, checking her phone. For a moment, she looked almost ordinary, tired, thoughtful. Our eyes met. Time seemed to pause. Confusion crossed her face first. Then disbelief. Mara, she said softly, walking toward me. Tessa glanced at me, silently asking if I was okay. I nodded. Elena stopped a few steps away. I didn't know you were coming. I wasn't invited, I said calmly. Her expression faltered. Oh, silence stretched between us. She looked genuinely uncertain, like she didn't know which version of me she was supposed to speak to. I'm glad you're here, she said finally. I studied her face, searching for guilt, awareness, anything. Maybe she meant it. Maybe she didn't understand the full picture yet. I just came to watch. I said. She hesitated. Tonight's kind of a big deal. I know. Her smile flickered, nervous now. Dad's been stressed all week. Something about board approvals. Board approvals. My pulse quickened. Before I could respond, someone called her name from across the room. She gave me a small, awkward nod and walked away. I watched her go, realizing something uncomfortable. She truly didn't know. Whatever was coming tonight would blindside her too. The moment approaches. Lights dimmed slightly. A gentle chime sounded through the room. Guests began moving toward their tables. The program was starting. Tessa leaned close. This is it, isn't it? Yes, I whispered. We took seats near the back, exactly where the message had instructed. From here, I could see everything. The stage, the podium. My parents seated at the front table, Elena glowing beneath soft lighting. My father adjusted his cuffs. The silver cufflinks caught the light. He clasped his hands together briefly, then unclasped them again. Nervous. Waiting. The host stepped onto the stage, smiling warmly. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Ellison Foundation Charity Gala. Applause filled the room. My heartbeat matched the rhythm. Speech introductions followed. Thank yous, acknowledgments, polite laughter. Everything normal. Everything expected. The story unfolding exactly the way my parents believed it would. Until the host said, and tonight, we celebrate not only generosity, but the unseen acts that make generosity possible. My stomach tightened. The screen behind him flickered to life. Soft light washed over the stage. I felt Tessa's hand find mine under the table. The host continued, voice warm and steady. Before we honor this year's featured artist, there is a special acknowledgement requested by one of our foundation's most significant supporters. My father straightened proudly. My mother smiled toward the audience. Elena leaned forward, glowing with anticipation. And I remembered the message. Watch his hands. The host lifted an envelope. My father adjusted his cufflinks again, but this time his fingers slipped. One cufflink loosened slightly, tilting sideways as if his hands suddenly forgot their practiced confidence. The host opened the envelope. I held my breath, and in that suspended second before the name was spoken, I realized something chilling. This moment wasn't just about exposure. Someone had engineered it so the truth would arrive in the one place my father could never control. Public silence. Cliffhanger. As the host unfolded the paper and prepared to read, my phone vibrated once under the table. Another message from the unknown sender. This is only the first truth. Don't stand up when they call you. The message sat on my screen like a hand on my shoulder. This is only the first truth. Don't stand up when they call you. For a second, I couldn't breathe. My first instinct was simple human. If they say my name, I stand. That's what you do when you're acknowledged. That's how you prove you belong in the room. But the message wasn't asking me to be polite. It was asking me to stay still, to let the moment land exactly the way it was designed to land. On the stage, the host unfolded the paper slowly, smiling as if he was about to announce something joyful. The room had quieted into that soft, expensive silence, chairs still, glasses stopped mid-air, donors leaning forward because they could sense a special moment. My father's shoulders were squared. His hands were clasped in front of him on the table, but his fingers kept tightening and loosening, like a man trying to control his own pulse through muscle. I remembered the instruction again, watch his hands. I did. And in that instant, I understood why. My father could hold a smile through anything. He could keep his voice calm even when he was furious. He could maintain his image like a polished shield, but his hands gave him away. The host spoke warmly into the microphone. Tonight, we are honored to acknowledge an extraordinary benefactor, someone who asked to remain private, not because they fear attention, but because they understand that the most meaningful support often happens quietly. A soft murmur of approval floated across the room. My mother's smile widened. She looked pleased, like this was part of the story she'd expected. Elena's eyes shone under the stage lights, already prepared to look humble. Then the host continued, and his tone shifted, barely, but enough that I felt it like a change in air pressure. This benefactor's gift was designated specifically for the expansion of our youth arts scholarship, ensuring that talent is never limited by what a family can or cannot provide. My heart thudded once hard. Not because it was cruel, because it was precise, across the room. My father's fingers paused on the table edge. He didn't understand yet, but some part of him sensed something was off, like a person hearing their own name called in a place they weren't expecting. The host smiled, eyes moving down the page, and this donor requested one thing. He paused, the way hosts do when they want people to lean in, that the acknowledgement be read by the family. A ripple of amused warmth moved through the audience. My mother laughed softly, touched. My father nodded graciously, already ready to perform generosity like it was a talent. The host turned toward the front table. "Mr. and Mrs. Ellison," he said, "would you please join me on stage?" Applause rose immediately. My father stood smoothly, posture perfect. My mother rose beside him, one hand lightly touching Elena's shoulder like a final camera, ready gesture. Elena's face glowed. She looked like she was about to be crowned. The trio walked toward the stage, and I stayed seated. Tessa's hand tightened around mine. "Are you okay?" she whispered. I stared straight ahead. "I don't know yet." On stage, the host handed my father a microphone and the printed card. My father accepted it with the confidence of a man who believed every room belonged to him. He glanced down at the card, and for half a second, half a breath, his face changed. Not enough for most people to notice, but I noticed. Because I'd been studying him my whole life. His eyes narrowed slightly, as if he'd read a sentence that didn't match what he expected. He cleared his throat and smiled. The room waited, his hands tightened on the card just a little too firmly. He began in the same warm, practiced tone he used at every fundraiser. "We are deeply grateful to all of you for being here tonight," he said. "The Ellison Foundation exists to support young artists because we believe talent should be nurtured, not limited." More applause. "Polite, easy," he continued. "And tonight we want to acknowledge a donor whose contribution made the VAR scholarship program possible." He looked down again. This time his fingers shifted, almost fumbling the card. The host leaned in slightly, smiling, expecting a name like Whitfield or Caraway, someone big and safe. My mother stood beside my father with a proud smile, eyes sweeping the audience. Elena held her hands together like prayer, ready to look grateful. My father lifted his gaze and began the sentence. "Please join us in thanking our anonymous benefactor." He paused. The pause wasn't dramatic, it was wrong, like a skipped heartbeat, and then he read it. Mara Ellison. Silence. Not the comfortable kind, not the respectful kind. The kind that turns a room into a single shared shock. My name didn't float out like a celebration. It hit the air like a dropped glass. For a moment, no one moved. No applause. No murmurs. Just confusion rippling quietly from table to table, because most of these people knew the Ellisons and their golden daughter story, and Mara wasn't part of it. My father's hand holding the microphone trembled slightly. There it was. His hands. He gripped the mic tighter, knuckles whitening, as if strength could force the moment to behave. My mother's smile froze. Her eyes flicked quickly toward the audience, then toward my father, then back out again, searching for a way to recover. Elena's expression collapsed into confusion. Her mouth parted slightly, as if she was trying to remember where I fit into the narrative she'd been raised in. I didn't stand up. I didn't wave. I didn't do the polite thing that would make it easier for them. Because someone had told me not to, and I understood why now. If I stood, the room would have a simple explanation. "Oh, she's here. That's the sister. How nice." But if I stayed seated, the silence stayed uncomfortable. It stayed unanswered. It forced people to wonder. It forced people to look at my parents and ask, without saying it out loud, "Why don't we know this daughter?" My father tried to continue, but his voice had changed. It wasn't as smooth. "Mara Ellison," he repeated, as if repetition could make it less real. For her generous support, the host, still smiling but now cautious, stepped in gently. "What a beautiful moment," he said, trying to patch the atmosphere. "Supporting a sibling's future?" But my father interrupted without meaning to. It was small. A single word, quietly spoken, but amplified by the microphone. "Sibling? Heard it." My father heard himself say it. And the realization on his face was almost imperceptible, but I felt it like a cold wind. He hadn't known. He truly hadn't known my name would be read. Someone had put this in motion without his consent, without his control. The host, still trying to keep things warm, continued reading from the script because the script was the real weapon. This donor requested that we honor not just the gift, but the story behind it, the host said. A story of quiet resilience, of an elder sibling who learned to build without applause. My mother's breath caught visibly. My father's eyes darted to the host's card. He was reading along now, and with every line, his posture stiffened, because the words were describing a girl they hadn't supported, a girl the room didn't associate with them, a girl who had been missing from their story. Elena's face flushed. She stared out at the audience as if she could will them to stop noticing, and still I didn't stand. I sat perfectly still near the back, my heart pounding in my chest, my hands folded in my lap. Tessa leaned closer. Mara, everyone's looking around. I whispered without moving my mouth much, let them. On stage, the host reached the final line. And this donor asked us to share one message, he said softly. That support isn't love unless it's equal. The sentence landed like a verdict. My father's jaw tightened. My mother blinked rapidly, her eyes suddenly wet. Elena looked like she'd been slapped. Not by a hand, but by a truth she couldn't argue with. The host smiled again, weaker this time, and said into the microphone, "Wherever you are tonight, Mara Ellison, thank you." The room waited. People turned their heads, scanning, searching for me. My mother's eyes swept the crowd desperately, and when they finally found me near the back, small, still, uncelebrating, her expression shattered. My father saw where she was looking. His gaze followed, and our eyes met. It wasn't a dramatic stare, just a simple, direct line between us. For the first time in years, my father looked at me like he was seeing a stranger wearing his last name. And his hands, those hands that always looked so controlled, tightened around the microphone like it was the only thing holding him upright. I felt something inside me go quiet, not joy, not revenge, a kind of calm I didn't know I could have. Because now the room knew my name, and my parents couldn't hide me without looking guilty. The host tried to bring the energy back with applause, and some people clapped, confused, delayed, uncertain. My father handed the microphone back too quickly. My mother didn't smile anymore. Alina didn't move. Then, as the host transitioned to the next segment, my phone vibrated again under the table. Unknown number, one line, one launch, Alina. She's about to learn what she signed? My stomach dropped. Signed? Alina signed something? I looked up at the stage again, my eyes snapping to my sister. Elena was staring at the card in the host's hand with a new kind of panic, as if she'd recognized a detail in the wording she'd never seen before. And in that moment, I realized the gala wasn't finished with us. It had just started. Cliffhanger, Elena turned suddenly toward my parents, whispering something urgently, and my father's face drained of color as he mouthed two words I could read from across the room. What agreement? My father's lips formed the words like he didn't believe they could be real. What agreement? From the back of the room, I watched Elena lean in close to him, her face pale under the warm gala lighting. She wasn't performing anymore. The glow was gone. What was left looked raw and young, like the moment a person realizes they've been smiling inside a trap. My mother reached for Elena's hand. Elena pulled back, slightly, not rude, just reflex. Like contact suddenly felt dangerous. The host on stage moved on, voice steady again, trying to lift the mood, introducing the next speaker, thanking donors, keeping the program afloat. But the room had changed. People were still listening, still clapping at the right times, yet the air carried a new current. Whispers, small, polite whispers, the kind that travel faster than shouting. I could feel eyes flicking from the stage to my parents' table and back again. People were curious now, and curiosity at events like this doesn't go away. It multiplies. Tessa's hand brushed my knee under the table. "Do we leave?" she whispered. I shook my head once. Not yet. I wasn't staying because I wanted to watch them suffer. I was staying because I needed to understand what Alina had signed. The unknown message replayed in my mind. She's about to learn what she signed. I watched Elena carefully. She looked like she was trying to remember something, like she was searching her mind for the exact moment she'd agreed to a thing she hadn't fully read. She stood abruptly. My father reached for her wrist, stopping her for a second. Elena bent down and whispered something into his ear. His expression tightened. Not anger, not yet, more like panic dressed in restraint. Then my mother stood too, smoothing her gown as if it were a shield. The three of them moved away from the front table toward the side corridor near the stage, smiling for anyone watching, nodding politely, acting like they were simply stepping out for a quick conversation. But their faces were wrong. The smiles didn't reach their eyes. Alina walked slightly ahead, shoulders tense. My father followed, posture stiff. My mother trailed behind, glancing over her shoulder once, and for a brief second, her eyes found me again. There was no accusation in her face, no anger, just shock, and something else that looked like fear. Tessa leaned toward me. "Mara, that's bad. That's really bad." "I know," I whispered. But my body had already moved before my mind finished deciding. I stood and walked calmly toward the same corridor, keeping distance, blending with a group of guests heading to the restroom area. I wasn't stalking them. I wasn't doing anything dramatic. I was just close enough to hear. Near the corridor entrance, a decorative wall separated the hallway from the main ballroom. Large floral arrangements. Soft lighting. Enough cover to stand near without looking like I was hiding. I stopped beside a tall arrangement of white lilies and pretended to check my phone. Tessa stayed a few feet back, watching my face like she was ready to pull me away if I looked like I might fall apart. Through the hallway opening, I heard my father's voice, low, controlled, but strained. Elena, what are you talking about? Elena's voice was shaky. I didn't know. Okay. I didn't. I thought it was standard. Jonah said it was just paperwork. My stomach tightened. My mother's voice came next, soft and sharp at the same time. What paperwork? Elena sounded close to tears. The scholarship naming rights. The sponsorship agreement, I signed it weeks ago. My father exhaled slowly. Yes, for the gala, for the program. That's what I thought, Elena whispered. But I just remembered there was a page, a clause. What clause? My father's tone was still calm, but I heard the edge now. Elena swallowed audibly. It said the scholarship would be named after the benefactor, not after me. Silence, a thin silence like stretched plastic. Then my mother said, that doesn't make sense. Elena's voice cracked. I swear I thought it was a formality. Jonah said it was to finalize the donor structure. He said I was the face of it, but the name attached would be the donors. My father's voice dropped even lower. And the donor is Mara. Elena didn't answer right away. When she did, it was barely audible. Yes, my throat went cold. So that was it. This wasn't just an acknowledgement. It was ownership. If the scholarship carried my name, it rewrote the foundation's story permanently. It made me part of the legacy in a way my parents could never erase. And it made Alina's crowned moment look like what it really was, a performance on other people's money and my parents' image. I heard my mother inhale sharply, like she'd been punched. That means? She began, voice trembling. That means the scholarship won't be the Alina Ellison Award. Elena whispered, no. My father spoke again, and this time his restraint cracked, just enough for emotion to leak through. Jonna wouldn't do that with my approval. Elena's voice was desperate. He didn't say it like that. He said it would protect the foundation. He said donors wanted transparency. He said, my father cut her off. He's my attorney. My mother said softly, he's on the board. Another silence. Then Alina said so quietly it almost didn't sound like a sentence. Did you know about Mara's name being read tonight? My father didn't answer fast enough, and that pause was an answer in itself. Because even if he didn't know, he also hadn't invited me. He hadn't prepared a seat for me. He hadn't wanted me seen. So how could he claim innocence now? I felt my pulse in my throat. Tessa touched my elbow gently. Mara. I held up a finger, just one, asking her for 10 seconds. I needed to hear the rest. My father's voice rose slightly, still controlled, but harsher now. This is sabotage. My mother said, Harold, not here. Elena whispered, what if Mara did it? And I felt that sentence like a slap, not because it hurt, because it revealed something. Even now, her first instinct was to wonder if I'd attacked them. Not to wonder if I'd been wronged. Not to wonder why my name had been hidden from the family story in the first place. My father's voice hardened. Mara doesn't have the resources. My mother's voice broke. Stop saying things like that. Silence. Then Alina said, swell and frightened, so what happens now? My father answered, and it was the first honest thing I'd heard from him tonight. Well, find Jonah. I stepped back from the floral wall, heart hammering. Find Jonah, of course, because Jonah was the only person who could have arranged all this. And if my father was looking for Jonah, tonight was about to get messier. My phone vibrated in my hand again. Unknown number. One sentency. They're gonna blame you. Let them. Then take the mic when the screen turns on again. My breath caught. Take the mic. No, that sounded impossible. That sounded like kind of dramatic move my family would call attention-seeking. But the message was clear. The plan wasn't finished, and my role in it wasn't just to be a name on paper. I looked back toward the ballroom entrance. On stage, the host was smiling again, introducing the next part of the program. Behind him, the massive screen glowed faintly, waiting. And suddenly I understood what Jonah meant when he said, tomorrow will be overwhelming. Because if they were about to blame me, then the next truth had to be bigger. Big enough that blame wouldn't stick. Cliffhanger. As I returned to my table, the lights dimmed again, this time more deliberately, and the host announced, and now a short video presentation prepared by the Foundation's board. The screen brightened, and the first frame showed a spreadsheet with one word stamped across it in Ready UIT. The lights dimmed until the ballroom softened into shadows. Conversations faded one by one, replaced by the quiet hum of anticipation. The massive screen behind the stage brightened, washing the room in pale blue light. I felt Tessa shift beside me. This feels serious, she whispered. I nodded without taking my eyes off the screen, because the first image wasn't artistic or inspirational the way Gala videos usually are. It wasn't smiling children or paint-covered classrooms. It was a spreadsheet, columns, numbers, dates, and across the center, stamped in bold red letters. Ayudite Ravai WELA Sofandayam. A ripple moved through the audience, subtle but unmistakable. Donors leaned forward. Board members exchanged quick looks. This wasn't part of the expected program. On stage, the host stood slightly to the side now, smile thinner, hands folded as if even he didn't fully know what was coming next. The video began with a calm, professional voiceover. For the past year, the Ellison Foundation has undergone an internal transparency review to ensure ethical allocation of donor contributions. My stomach tightened. Across the room, my parents had returned to their table. My father sat rigidly upright, eyes locked on the screen. My mother's hands were clasped tightly together in her lap. Elena looked frozen. The screen shifted. Charts appeared, donation totals compared to credited sponsorships. Lines highlighted in yellow, then red. The voice continued, neutral and precise. During this review, discrepancies were identified between publicly credited contributions and verified donor records. A soft murmur spread through the ballroom, not loud enough to interrupt, but loud enough to signal discomfort. I watched my father carefully. His face remained composed, but his hands rested flat on the table now, fingers pressed so firmly against the linen that the knuckles had turned pale. He wasn't blinking much. He already understood where this was going. The video advanced again. Images of past Gala programs appeared, photos of smiling donors, printed acknowledgments, scholarship announcements. Each one paused briefly before a new overlay appeared beside it. Asti ulfayandi zors is pure ivat donar pu ssigendi licenenfo ndio. Gas didn't happen in rooms like this. Instead, silence thickened, the kind of silence where people process quietly, calculating what it means for their own reputations to be associated with the situation. Tessa leaned closer. They're exposing them. Yes? I whispered, but my voice didn't sound triumphant. It sounded heavy, because watching truth unfold publicly felt less like revenge and more like gravity finally doing its job. On screen, another slide appeared. This one showed the Expansion Scholarship, the same program being celebrated tonight. The voiceover continued. To restore transparency and ensure proper recognition, the Foundation Board approved corrective attribution to verified benefactors. The words landed carefully. Legally, deliberately, the screen faded briefly to a black. Then a single line appeared, Primario char yo hrs ex person. The audience leaned forward almost as one, and then my name appeared, Mary Ellison. A collective intake of breath swept through the room. I didn't move, didn't stand, didn't react, I simply watched. Across the ballroom, my mother's hand flew to her mouth. Elena stared at the screen as if trying to rewrite it with sheer will. My father didn't move at all. Only his hands changed, fingers curling inward slowly, as if gripping something invisible. The voiceover softened. This correction honors the individual whose contribution ensured the continuation of this program without public recognition or expectation. The screen shifted again. Now it showed a timeline: donations, transfers, approvals, and beneath them a simple caption: acknowledgement delayed, attribution restored. The message was unmistakable. The foundation hadn't collapsed, but its story had changed, and everyone in the room understood it. The video ended quietly. No dramatic music, no accusation, just truth presented like documentation. The lights slowly brightened again. For a moment, no one clapped. Then a few hesitant hands began. Polite applause followed, not celebratory, not enthusiastic, but respectful, measured. The kind of applause people give when they aren't sure whether they're witnessing courage or damage control. The host returned to the microphone, voice calm but careful. The Ellison Foundation remains committed to transparency and growth, he said. And tonight, we thank all those who make that possible. His eyes briefly scanned the room. They paused on me, just long enough to acknowledge that he knew exactly where I was sitting. Then he smiled gently. And sometimes, he added, the quietest contributions carry the greatest impact. More applause. This time slightly stronger, not for my parents, not for Elena. For the idea of fairness restored, I exhaled slowly, realizing I'd been holding tension in my shoulders for minutes. Tessa squeezed my hand. Morale, this is huge. I nodded faintly, but my focus stayed on my parents' table. My father finally moved. He leaned toward my mother, speaking quietly, jaw tight. She nodded rapidly, eyes still wet. Elena didn't speak at all. She was staring at me now, not with anger, with confusion. And something else, understanding beginning to form. The narrative she'd grown up believing was cracking in real time. My phone vibrated again, unknown numbered. I already knew it would. I opened the message. Now they know the past. Next comes the choice. Be ready. Choice. Before I could think further, the host spoke again. And before dinner is served, he said warmly, we would like to invite one final speaker, someone whose story represents resilience, independence, and the spirit of this foundation. My heartbeat quickened. The host looked direct toward the back of the room. Toward me. Mara Ellison. He said gently, would you join us on stage? The room turned. Hundreds of eyes, waiting. And suddenly I understood why the message earlier had said, don't stand up when they call you. Because now, this invitation wasn't part of their script anymore. It was mine. Cliffhanger, as I stood slowly from my chair, my father rose at the same time, taking a step toward the stage as if to stop something, and for the first time in my life, I realized he wasn't trying to control the room anymore, he was trying to control me. For a moment I didn't move. The room waited. Hundreds of faces turned toward me, curiosity spreading faster than sound. I could feel it physically, the weight of attention pressing gently but firmly against my chest. My name still echoed faintly in the air. Mara Ellison, would you join us on stage? I remembered the earlier message, don't stand up when they call you, and I finally understood why. That moment had belonged to them, to the foundation, to the correction, to the narrative rewritten without my voice. If I had stood then, I would have been part of their recovery. A quiet symbol, a convenient ending, but this invitation, this one came after the truth, after the audit, after the room understood something had been hidden. Now, if I stood, it would be my choice, not theirs. I rose slowly from my chair. Chairs shifted softly around me. Conversations stopped entirely. Even the waitstaff paused along the walls. Tessa squeezed my hand once before letting go. "You've got this," she whispered. I wasn't sure what this even was yet, but I walked anyway. The path to the stage felt longer than it should have. Each step echoed faintly against the polished floor, heels tapping in a steady rhythm that somehow calmed me. I didn't look at the crowd. I looked straight ahead. Halfway there, movement caught my eye. My father had stood. He stepped slightly into the aisle, not fully blocking my path, but close enough that the intention was clear. Control, even now. His smile was polite for anyone watching, but his eyes were sharp with urgency. "Mara," he said quietly as I approached, voice low enough that only I could hear. "You should talk before you go up there." The words were familiar. A lifetime of private conversations meant to redirect, soften, contain. I stopped a few feet away from him. For a second, neither of us spoke. Up close, he looked older than I remembered. Not physically, emotionally. The certainty he usually carried had cracks in it now. "I think," I said calmly, "they already heard enough." His jaw tightened. "You don't understand what's happening." I held his gaze. "I understand more than you think." Behind him, my mother stood frozen beside the table, hands clasped together tightly. Elena watched from her chair, eyes wide, confusion slowly turning into realization. My father lowered his voice further. "This isn't the place for family issues." The irony almost made me smile. "This stopped being private," I said softly, when my name was read into a microphone. His hand lifted slightly, instinctively, like he meant to stop me from passing. Then he hesitated. Because people were watching, an image still mattered. After a brief second, he stepped aside, not willingly, but publicly. I walked past him, and something shifted inside me, not victory, not anger. Just a quiet recognition that for the first time, I wasn't adjusting myself to keep him comfortable. The stage steps appeared in front of me. The host extended a hand kindly as I approached. "Thank you for coming up," he said gently. I nodded, stepping onto the platform. The lights were warmer up here, brighter. From this angle, the audience became a sea of faces softened by distance. I could see my parents clearly now. My mother looked emotional, uncertain whether to smile or cry. Elena leaned forward slightly, searching my face. My father remained standing near his chair, posture rigid, hands clasped tightly in front of him again. His hands, still tense, still revealing what his face refused to show. The host handed me the microphone. Applause rose, polite at first, then growing stronger as people leaned into the story unfolding in front of them. I waited until the room quieted again. The microphone felt heavier than expected. For a moment, I simply breathed. I hadn't prepared a speech. No notes, no rehearsed lines, just years of silence sitting quietly behind my ribs. "I didn't expect to be here tonight," I began. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. A few soft laughs moved through the room, easing tension. I actually didn't even know my name was part of this event until very recently. Honesty settled the audience immediately. People leaned in, not for drama, but for authenticity. I glanced briefly at my parents' table. My father's expression remained guarded. My mother's eyes shone with tears. Elena looked like she was seeing me clearly for the first time. "I want to say something important," I continued. "Not about donations, not about recognition." I paused, choosing the words carefully. "But about visibility." The room stayed perfectly still. "There are people who help quietly," I said. "People who work, struggle, and build their lives without applause. Not because they don't matter, but because sometimes they aren't seen." My throat tightened slightly, but I continued. "And tonight isn't about proving anyone wrong. It's about something simpler." I took a breath. "It's about making sure that support and love aren't measured by who looks the best on a stage." Silence followed. Not uncomfortable, thoughtful. I wasn't accusing anyone directly. I didn't need to. The truth had already arrived. "I'm grateful the foundation chose transparency," I added softly. "Because growth only happens when we're honest about where we started." A few heads nodded in the crowd. I felt the tension in my chest loosen. For years, I'd imagined what it would feel like to finally be heard. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It felt calm. I offered a small smile. And I hope the artists supported by this scholarship never have to wonder whether they matter. The applause came naturally this time. Warm, sincere. I lowered the microphone slightly, ready to step away. But before I could, the massive screen behind me flickered again. The audience's attention shifted instantly. I turned slowly. A new slide appeared. Not financial records. Not Foundation Brandon. A single document. A contract page, highlighted in yellow, and at the bottom, Elena's signature. A quiet gasp spread through the room. My heart dropped, because beneath her signature was a clause title now visible to everyone. Chernasefarov Luja Hyi my Rektis Final Uhy Board Override. I heard Elena stand abruptly behind me, and then her voice, shaken, confused, cut through the silence. I didn't agree to that. The room froze again, and I realized the night wasn't finished exposing truths yet. Cliffhanger. As Elena stepped toward the stage, the screen advanced automatically to the next page, revealing a second signature added after hers, one that belonged to someone none of us expected. The room didn't breathe. That was the only way I could describe it. The applause from moments ago vanished completely, replaced by a silence so sharp it felt fragile, like one wrong movement could shatter it. Behind me, the screen glowed brighter. Elena's signature sat at the bottom of the contract page, unmistakable. Her handwriting curved neatly across the line, confident in the way signatures are when you believe you're signing something harmless. And beneath it, a second signature slowly came into focus as the slide zoomed in. The audience leaned forward collectively. I turned fully toward the screen. For one suspended second, my brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. Then recognition hit. Harold Ellison, my father. A quiet gasp spread across the ballroom, not dramatic, just dozens of people understanding something at the same time. Elena's footsteps sounded behind me as she moved closer to the stage, her voice shaking. That can't be right. The microphone still hung loosely in my hand, amplifying every small sound. I lowered it slowly, unsure whether to speak or simply let the moment unfold. My father didn't move. He stood near his table, face pale now, eyes fixed on the screen like it had betrayed him. My mother whispered his name, barely audible. Harold. The host stepped forward cautiously, clearly unprepared for this part. Ladies and gentlemen. He began gently. It appears we are viewing internal documentation related to the scholarship structure. But the audience wasn't listening to him anymore. They were watching my family. Watching the story rearrange itself in real time. Elena reached the bottom of the stage steps, looking up at me, then at the screen again. I thought it was just approval paperwork, she said, voice cracking. Dad, you said it was standard. My father finally moved. He walked forward slowly, every step deliberate, like he was calculating how much control he could still salvage. That document, he said carefully, projecting calm, was part of a broader restructuring process. His voice sounded practiced again, but thinner. Controlled damage. Elena shook her head. You told me it was just administrative. It was, he replied quickly. The board required flexibility for naming rights. That's all. The screen changed again. Another highlighted section appeared, a clausograph enlarged so everyone could read it. In the event of reputational review or financial correction, naming authority may transfer to verified primary benefactor without additional consent. Murmurs spread openly now, no longer polite whispers. Understanding, the clause meant Elena's name had never been guaranteed. It meant my father had signed away control before tonight ever began. My stomach tightened. This wasn't sabotage. This was consequence. Elena turned toward him slowly. You knew this could happen. Her voice wasn't angry yet, just stunned. My father hesitated, a fraction too long. I trusted the process, he said finally. It wasn't an answer, and everyone heard that. From the stage, I watched his hands again. They weren't steady anymore. His fingers flexed repeatedly, searching for composure that wouldn't return. The unknown message echoed in my mind. Watch his hands. This was the moment. Not anger, loss of control. For the first time in my life, my father didn't look powerful. He looked cornered. The host cleared his throat, trying to regain order. Perhaps we should continue with dinner while the board clarifies. No. Elena said suddenly. Her voice carried across the room without a microphone. She looked up at me, eyes glossy, then back at our father. I want to understand, she said. Was this scholarship ever supposed to be mine? The question landed heavily, because beneath it was another question she hadn't said out loud. Was I ever supposed to matter more than her? My father opened his mouth, then closed it again. My mother stepped forward, tears now openly falling. This isn't the time for. When is the time? Elena asked softly. The room went still again. No one interrupted. No one moved. My father exhaled slowly, shoulders lowering just slightly, as if exhaustion finally outweighed performance. The foundation needed credibility, he said quietly. The words felt clinical, businesslike. Elena stared at him. And I was credibility? You were visibility, he corrected automatically. The distinction hurt even to hear. I felt something shift beside me. Not anger, not satisfaction. Understanding. Because in that moment, Elena realized what I'd known for years. We had both been roles. Just different ones. The screen behind us faded back to the foundation logo, as if the presentation itself had finished its purpose. The damage or the truth was already done. I stepped forward slightly, lifting the microphone again without thinking. I didn't know about the contract, I said gently. The audience turned back toward me. I didn't ask for any of this. My voice stayed calm, steady. But maybe tonight isn't about who gets credit. I glanced at Elena, her shoulders trembled slightly. Maybe it's about finally being honest about why recognition mattered so much in the first place. No accusations. No blame, just truth placed gently into the room. The tension softened, not resolved, but understood. My father looked at me then, really looked. Not as an interruption, not as an inconvenience, as a person he no longer understood how to control. And for the first time, he didn't speak. The host carefully guided the audience ins again, uncertain but supportive. Staff began moving, dinner service restarting slowly, conversations returning in cautious waves. The gala continued, but the illusion didn't. Elena stepped back from the stage, eyes distant, processing something deeper than embarrassment. My mother followed her immediately, protective instincts replacing composure. My father remained where he stood for a few seconds longer, alone. Then my phone vibrated one last time. Unknown number. I opened it. Truth revealed. Now comes your choice, finish it or walk away. I stared at the message, because suddenly I realized something terrifying. Everything so far, the audit, the announcement, the contract that only exposed the past, what happened next was entirely up to me. Cliffhangered as I lowered the phone, the host approached quietly and whispered, "The board wants to know if you'd like to say one final thing before the night ends." The host's question lingered in the air between us. Would you like to say one final thing before the night ends? Behind him, the ballroom had begun to breathe again. Silverware clinked softly against plates. Conversations restarted in careful tones, the way people speak after witnessing something they know they'll talk about for years. I looked out across the room. My mother sat beside Alina now, holding her hand tightly. Elena's posture had changed, shoulders lowered, eyes distant, no longer shining for an audience but searching inward instead. My father stood alone near the edge of the table, speaking quietly with two board members. His expression was controlled again, but thinner somehow, like the structure beneath it had cracked. For the first time, he looked uncertain where to stand. The host waited patiently. I realized the room wasn't asking for drama. It was waiting for closure. I nodded once. Okay. He handed me the microphone again and stepped aside. The lights softened slightly as I moved to the center of the stage. The enormous screen behind me now displayed only the foundation logo, neutral, calm, almost peaceful after everything that had unfolded. I took a breath. No notes, no preparation, just honesty. I didn't come here tonight planning to speak. I began. The room quieted immediately. I actually wasn't even sure I belonged here. A few soft smiles appeared around the room, gentle understanding. But tonight wasn't really about me. I continued. And it wasn't about a contract or a donation either. I paused, searching for the right words. It was about something a lot simpler and a lot harder. I glanced toward my family's table. My mother met my eyes, tears still resting along her lashes. Elena watched carefully, not defensive anymore, just listening. My father didn't look away. It's easy to celebrate success, I said softly. It's easy to applaud when everything looks perfect. But families and organizations don't grow because they look perfect. The room stayed completely still. They grow when they're honest enough to admit where they went wrong. No accusation, no raised voice. Just truth laid gently where everyone could see it. I spent a long time thinking recognition was something you had to earn, I continued. That if you worked hard enough, eventually people would notice you. My throat tightened slightly, but I kept going. But tonight taught me something different. I exhaled slowly. Being seen isn't about standing on a stage. It's about being acknowledged even when there isn't an audience. Silence followed, not uncomfortable, just thoughtful. I shifted my grip on the microphone. I don't want tonight to end with embarrassment or blame, I said. Because truth isn't meant to punish people, it's meant to give them a chance to choose differently moving forward. I let those words settle. Across the room, my father's posture softened slightly, as if he hadn't expected mercy. Elena wiped at her eyes. My mother covered her mouth again. I'm grateful the scholarship exists, I added, not because my name is attached to it, but because it will help someone who might otherwise feel invisible. A small ripple of applause began, then faded as I raised a hand gently. One more thing, I said. The room quieted again. Tonight doesn't fix the past. I look directly at my parents now, but it gives all of us the chance to decide what happens next. The words weren't dramatic, they were calm, open. A choice instead of a verdict. I lowered the microphone slightly. And for me, I finished softly. Moving forward means building something healthier, not pretending nothing happened, but not letting it define everything either. I smiled faintly. Thank you for listening. The applause came slowly at first, then stronger, warmer than before. Not celebratory, not performative. Respectful. Real. I handed the microphone back to the host and stepped down from the stage. The lights felt less harsh now, the room less heavy. As I reached the floor, Elena stood. For a moment she hesitated, then walked toward me. Up close, her eyes were red but clear. I didn't know, she said quietly. I believed her. I know, I replied. She swallowed. I think I'm just realizing a lot of things tonight. I nodded. Me too. She gave a small, uncertain smile, the first honest one I'd seen from her in years. Behind her, my mother approached slowly, as if unsure whether she was allowed to come closer. She stopped a few steps away. Mara, she whispered. There were 1,000 things she might have wanted to say. Apologies, explanations, regret. But tonight didn't need speeches anymore. I gave her a small nod. Permission, not forgiveness yet, but not rejection either. My father remained where he was for several seconds before finally walking toward us. He stopped at a respectful distance. No control, no instructions. Just quiet. He began, then paused, clearly unfamiliar with not having the right words ready. For once, I didn't rush to fill the silence. Eventually, he said simply, "You spoke well." It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't dismissal either. And strangely, that was enough for now. My phone vibrated one final time. Unknown number, I opened it. You chose Grace. That was never something they could control. No more messages followed. No explanation of who had guided the night from the shadows. Just silence. I slipped the phone back into my bag and looked around the ballroom one last time. Nothing had exploded. No shouting. No dramatic collapse. Just truth quietly rearranging relationships that had stood unchanged for years. And as dinner resumed and conversation softened into normalcy again, I realized something unexpected. The revenge I once imagined didn't exist. What existed instead was freedom. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting to be seen. I already was, and whatever came next would finally be my choice.